Hey everyone! Today I want to talk about The Phantom of Liberty from 1974 by Luis Buñuel. This is the 34th episode of my 1000 Favorite Movie series, where I talk about the movies I love the most in a random order. Luis Buñuel is one of my absolute favorite directors, and certainly the director who influenced me the most when I was in film school. His sense of humor, both surrealist and subtle, that permeates much of his work, is what I basically try to emulate when I made two of my three student films. In fact, I called the first of these films The Ghost of Freedom, a direct riff on The Phantom of Liberty, even though the two films aren't really connected at all, and the title makes no sense in relation to the movie. It's an inside joke that I knew no one else would get, but I did it because it made me chuckle to myself, which is what I do at almost every shot of Buñuel's best films, of which I think this is among. Even among Buñuel's movies, this is a very unique film. It was his second to last film, but it shows that he was still greatly willing to experiment, turning the idea of narrative on its head. This is actually his only film that doesn't follow its characters from beginning to end, as they keep changing as the movie goes along. Like the Richard Linklater movie that I'm sure was inspired by it, Slacker, the story passes from one character to another as their paths intersect, making for a movie with many different narratives tied together. This more or less plays like a series of sketches as a result, but the transitions from one story to the next feel very natural and unforced. If this kind of structure has a precedent that I know of, it's the TV show Monty Python's Flying Circus, where each of the sketches surrealistically connect to each other in just about every conceivable way. And considering Monty Python was one of my biggest obsessions when I was younger, I appreciate that Buñuel made a film honoring their structure, as well as their humor, whether he knew it or not. To give a basic example of this, one of the stories is about a woman staying in a hotel for an evening, and before she leaves the next day, a man asks her if she can drop him off at some town. So she does, and after he leaves, we start to follow him as he goes to give a lecture at the police academy. Later, two of the police who are students in the class give a ticket to a speeding car, and after that, we start following the man in the car as he goes to a doctor's appointment. This pattern continues for the whole movie, but not every transition is as basic as these. At the end of one scene, a police commissioner starts to look at and admire his shoes, which transitions into another police officer getting his shoes shined. Then we follow the customer next to him. And at the beginning, we get a story in a historical setting, but at the end, a narrator starts talking, and we transition to a woman reading the story on a park bench. But while this interlocking and flowing structure is very witty, the movie's most memorable for the sketches and situations themselves, which is where Buñuel's sense of humor and surrealism really shine. Some of the highlights include situations that are nearly impossible to describe because they don't make sense on their face, where what you see on the screen doesn't match what's being described by the characters, or things don't logically connect and make you question what you're seeing. Case in point is the part where parents get a call from their daughter's school that their daughter's missing. No one knows where she is. They arrive at school, and everyone's befuddled how she could have possibly disappeared. Well, they enter the classroom, and their daughter goes up to her mom and tells her that she's here, but she tells her to be quiet and go back to her seat. And they continue talking with the headmaster about her apparent disappearance, even though she literally just acknowledged that she is here. They then call roll, and when her name is called, she says that she's present. She says, "You see, she's there," but they still go on about not knowing where she is. This continues as they literally bring her to the police station to start a search for her, and here too people acknowledge her, yet believe that she's missing. The commissioner even takes note of her appearance to fill out a missing persons report, and has an officer take a good look at her before searching for her. This premise is incredibly difficult to accept, where what you see and what the characters see don't match their actions or their thinking. How can you possibly look at a person and genuinely not see them? Maybe this is a commentary on how children can feel invisible to their parents, or it's just a densely mystifying but funny piece of surrealism. Another such scenario is about a person who starts shooting random people from a very tall building. He gets arrested and goes to court. He's found guilty and gets handed the death penalty. So, what happens to him? He gets his handcuffs taken off, shakes hands with everyone, and walks right out of the courtroom as if he just got acquitted. People even ask for his autograph as he leaves. This is almost as mind blowing as the first example, as the actions that happen on screen don't logically connect with each other, making us question what we're really watching. The whole movie isn't on this level; if it were, it might border on unwatchable, but there are plenty of other moments that are just as humorous. The crudest moment that's right up my alley is the gag where the bathroom and the dinner table are reversed. These people socially gather at this table, but instead of eating, they sit on toilets and talk about eating as if it were going to the bathroom. Then one of them gets up and goes to the bathroom, but it's actually a room where he can sit down and eat a meal. A scene of toilet humor, if there ever was one. Not every gag works for me, though. The worst for me is the lecture in the police academy that I mentioned earlier. While all the other gags are original and thoroughly feel like Buñuel, this one just screams sub Monty Python to me, where the teacher's trying to give a lecture while everyone is distracted and getting called away to do other tasks. Don't get me wrong, I love Monty Python, and the toilet gag was certainly in the realm of humor and at their high level, but it still managed to feel original, whereas this one doesn't. There's also the scene where the aunt and her nephew, who have feelings for each other, go to a hotel to start an affair. She's reluctant, he persists, and the scene feels like a melodrama parody that's both amusing and disturbing as it's happening. But the payoff doesn't really hit for me, and leaves me questioning why it's in the movie in the first place. But overall, the movie is quietly riotous and inventive throughout, making it for me Buñuel's funniest movie shot in color. I haven't even gotten to my favorite gags yet, but I will in a second. I also want to emphasize Buñuel's style as a director and how it enhances the humor. He uses several different techniques in most of his movies that, for me, inherently add humor to every scene, but conveying how is very difficult. Firstly, he doesn't have many straight up comic lines that you might expect in ordinary comedies. Rather, his movies mostly present the front of serious dramas, the feeling of which is given through the sheer quietness of his later movies, the religious and historical themes that are discussed, and the deliberate pacing. But being familiar with Buñuel's work, it's not difficult for me to sense the satire just beneath the surface. So when the payoff eventually comes, it's very rewarding. A perfect example of what I mean is one of the funniest moments of the movie that I frankly forgot about until my latest rewatch for this video. These friars are in a hotel along with a woman who's staying for the night. One of them brings a religious relic to the woman's door, and she opens. He offers to pray for her sick father, to which she gladly accepts. Other friars also enter the room, and they all start to pray. This is done seemingly sincerely, as it shows them from a high angle, moving closer toward the relic while we hear the entire prayer. Pretty serious, but when the prayer is over, we cut to the relic, but this time with smoke covering the room, and we see everyone smoking and gambling. They're even betting with their religious items, and one of them says maybe the funniest line of the movie, I open with the Virgin. But the genius part is that the way this is shot is exactly the same as the way the previous scene was shot, with the same quietness and deliberate pacing, and no over the top acting or anything. Everything is perfectly normal, except that it's not. I'd also be remiss not to at least mention the way Buñuel moves the camera, which for me is one of the main keys to his genius, but I doubt I can communicate what I mean here. The camera moves often, but in a way that you almost don't notice it, moving in short, very precise movements to keep the blocking dynamic, but also very subtly adding, in my view, a sense of humor to the action. Sometimes the center lining of jokes is clear, like the way it zooms in on something, and sometimes it makes for beautiful motions that elegantly complement the sounds that we hear to add beauty and humor. I'm speaking of, for instance, near the beginning, when it pans around the statue while the soldiers are drunkenly singing in the background. And also the shot in the hotel when we start at a fireplace and glide up to the stuffed fox while Spanish acoustic guitar music is playing in the room next door. But now for my favorite moments. I'll start with hands down my favorite gag in the movie. It's so good that I want to give you a warning to stop watching if you're interested in seeing this movie. Anyway, it's the first one in the present day, where we have a man creepily interacting with the young girl sliding down the slide. He talks to a couple of them in a way that screams pedophile and pulls them aside to give them some pictures, but tells them not to tell their parents. Of course, one of them does as soon as she gets home, to her parents played by the great actors Jean-Claude and Monica Vitti. Vitti takes the pictures, becomes outraged, and scolds the maid for allowing this to happen. She shows it to her husband, and by looking at them, they both get excited and start kissing. By this point, the delay is so long that we're just bursting to see the pictures ourselves, and when we do, they turn out to be pictures of buildings. Maybe they're too symmetrical for the husband, but the fact that these are treated like porn is just hilarious to me. I also love when there's a picture that's apparently too filthy for his wife to see, so he rips it, but she takes it and we see it. She's just as disgusted as he is and rips it to shreds. Next, it's the climax of the hotel sequence, which is the longest in the movie. In the same hotel as the friars, the woman, and the aunt and nephew, Michael Lonsdale is there and invites everyone into his room. He seems like a nice and accommodating guy, so they accept. Typically, the setup is stretched out to provide maximum suspense for those who are wondering what Buñuel's up to. Once he and his partner gather everyone inside, they separately slip into the bathroom and get changed. And suddenly, while no one suspects it, she starts whipping him dominatrix style as he cries out self denigrating insults. Everyone starts to leave, and he yells, "Wait, don't go! Let the monk stay at least." Finally, it's maybe the most outrageous gag. The police commissioner is in a bar and sees a woman sitting in a booth. He approaches her out of amazement, as she looks exactly like his deceased sister. He talks about how much he loved her and reminisces about one afternoon when she played piano for him. We see the scene play out, and when he goes into the piano room to listen to her play, she's completely naked. It's not really a joke per se in the typical sense, but it's a funny journey into this guy's mind as we see all the sexual fantasies he has about his sister on display. It could be just his imagination that has her playing naked when she really wasn't, or it's not his imagination and they really had this kind of relationship. I'm thinking about it too much. So, in the end, what I love about The Phantom of Liberty is that it has Buñuel's surrealist sense of humor on full display, with a very experimental structure that leaves no room for even a main character. It has many of his most comedic moments that exemplify the kind of humor that had a big impact on me when I got into him. Yes, this does touch on some serious themes about the modern world, but I like to take this movie as simply a surrealist joke, one that probably has very few equals in film. It's one of my 1000 favorite movies. Thanks for watching my video. Goshou makoto ni arigatou gozaimasu. Have you seen The Phantom of Liberty? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think of all of my favorite movies as friends, and I think of my audience as friends too. Remember, I upload a new video every Friday, so if you want to help me complete this 1000 favorite movies epic, don't forget to like and subscribe.